On this video, we come to the translation of Elijah before Elisha. And I want to read verse 1, and then we'll talk about it with notes from commenting on the text. So it reads, Vayehi be. Let me just read it in English and then go back and do the Hebrew as we come to different sections. And it came to pass when the Lord would take up Elijah uh, with a whirlwind into heaven that Elijah went to Elisha from Gilgal. So as we look at this particular verse, uh, just reading the Hebrew a moment, Vayehi be ha'alot Adonai et Eliyahu ba'sa'ara ha'shamayim. That is, when the time came for the Lord to take Elijah into heaven, a revelation of this event has been made to the prophet, but unknown to him, it seems to have also been revealed to his disciples and to Elisha in particular, who kept constantly beside him. And so we're going to see a parallel event in the New Testament to the ascension of Christ, it seems to me. So then we go to before verse 2, notice that Elijah went with Elijah from Gilgal. Vayelek Eliyahu Elisha min ha Gilgal. Gilgal is not the more famous Gilgal near Jerusalem, but a town probably of the same name, probably on the main north-south road through Israel, about 7 miles north of Bethel. Note that Elijah and Elisha are journeying in logical order of cities from Gilgal to Bethel to Jerusalem and then to the Jordan River. The three cities appear to have had centers, resident communities, or guilds of prophets attached to their sanctuaries. Elijah led to do so through the impulse of the Spirit, we are told in verse 2, is here paying them a final visit, possibly, on his way to the place of his ascension. Elijah is depicted as either wishing to proceed alone or, out of compassion for Elisha, suggesting that he stay at Gilgal, then at Bethel, then at Jericho. Elisha is depicted as so devoted to the great prophet that he will not leave him no matter how long the journey. One is reminded here of Jonathan's devotion to David or Ruth to Naomi. Elisha, too, knew that the time was at hand, and at every place the sons of the prophets, that is, their disciples, spoke to him of the approaching removal of his master Elijah. Their last stopping place was at the Jordan River. They were followed at a distance by 50 disciples of the prophets from the prophetic guild, that is, or school, community at Jericho, who wanted to witness the miraculous translation of the prophet. And my mind again goes to the New Testament and the translation of Jesus when he ascended back to the Father. So then, as we continue in the next verses, And Elijah said unto Elisha, Tarry here, I pray you, for the Lord has sent me unto Bethel. And Elisha said, sort of an interesting comment, Vayomer Elisha, Chai Adonai, v'chai nafshecha, im ezvecha. That is, Elijah said, as the Lord lives, and um, as your soul lives, I will not leave you. Im ezvecha. And so we're told, so they went down to Bethel, the Yerudu Beit El. And what happens at Bethel is going to be a wonderful miracle of the Hebrew scriptures. The sons of the prophets that were at Bethel, we are told, went forth to Elijah and said to him, Vayetze b'nei ha-nehavim asher beit El, El Elisha v'yomeru elav. Do you know that the Lord will take away your master from your head today? Hayadata ki hayom Adonai lokeach et Adonecha me'al roshecha. And he said, Vayomer gamani yadati hechashu. He said, I know, hold your peace. The Lord will take away your master from your head. The sons of the prophets, interesting phrase, were at Bethel, who were at Bethel, were telling Elisha that there was going to be a removal, that the Lord would take away his teacher, this teacher and leader, or Elisha's teacher and leader. Elisha told them that he was aware of this and asked them to hold their peace or to cease speaking concerning the matter. The same thing happened in Jericho, and the author recorded again for emphasis the question of the sons of the prophets, as well as Elisha's reply. So, as we continue on in the text, notice the sons of the prophets are aware that God is going to do this miracle. So Elijah said unto him, that is to Elisha, Tarry here, I pray you, for the Lord has sent me to Jordan. Vayomer lo Eliyahu Shevna po, ki Adonai shelacheni hayardena. And he said, As the Lord lives, and as my soul lives, I will not leave you. In other words, he refuses to leave. Vayomer chai Adonai v'chei nafshecha im ezvecha vayelachu shneim. So the two of them went on together, and we're told 50 men of the prophets went along as well. In verse 7, of the sons of the prophets, and stood over against them from afar, and they too stood by the Jordan. And notice what happens then in verse 8. And I'm reading again. Elijah took his mantle and wrapped it together. Vayikach Eliyahu et hadarto vayiklom, wrapped it together, and he smote the waters. Vayakeh et hamayim, and they were divided here and there, so that they went over on dry ground. Vayehatsu hina v'hina vayavru shnehem beharava. And it's interesting as we look at the smiting of the waters and how they go over together. And when Elijah folded his cloak together and struck the waters, it's like it reminds us of the rod of Moses. It had the divinely operating power of the Spirit involved in this. So then in verse 9, notice the question, what wish shall I grant you? This is the question of Elijah. Uh, Vayehi, that is, it came to pass when they had gone over, Ke Avram ve'Eliyahu Amar uh, Elisha, Elijah said unto Elisha, ask what I shall do for you before I am taken from you. Sha'al ma e'aseh lach b'terem elakach me'imak. And Elisha said, I pray, let a double portion of my spirit be of your spirit be upon me. Vayomer Elisha vayehina pi shnayim beruchacha Eli. In other words, he wants a double portion of Elijah's spirit upon him. It's interesting. Let a double portion of your spirit be upon me, is the reading of the text. This request was not, as we commonly suppose, for the authority and power of working miracles twice as great as Elijah's, nor does it mean a higher endowment of the prophetic gift. Rather, it seems, the phrase, a double portion, was a term applied to the firstborn son and the inheritance which was due him. See, for example, Deuteronomy 21, verse 17. Therefore, Elisha's request was simply to be heir to the prophetic office, normally selected by God and not inheritable to the gifts of his master and to the leadership of the prophetic guilds. He wants to have this, can I say, leadership given to him of the prophetic guilds that Elijah had had. And so, as we continue on, we're going to see a wonderful miracle. Notice in verse 10, it then reads, and he said, you are asking a hard thing. Vayomer hakshita lisho, you're asking a hard thing. Nevertheless, if you see me when I am taken from you, it shall be unto you as well. Im tere oti lukach me itak yehilecha chen. It shall be to you as well. But if not, it shall not be so. Ve'im ayin lo yeyeh. And it came to pass as they stood, as they still went and talked. Vayehi hema holechim halok v'daber. Behold, there appeared a chariot, v'hene rechav esh, a chariot of fire, v'susei esh, and horses of fire, vayifredu bein shneihim, which parted between the two of them, divided them asunder, so to speak. Vaya'a Eliyahu, and Elijah went ba so'ara hashemayim, went by a whirlwind to heaven. It's amazing when you're reading this, the miracle that takes place here. When he asked the question, it was said, you're asking a hard thing, an extraordinary blessing that I cannot give you to have a double portion. God can only give it, seems to be the idea. Nevertheless, Elijah, doubtless by the secret directions of the Spirit, proposed to Elisha a sign. If you see me depart, then you will get your request. If Elisha is permitted to see Elijah depart, he can know that he has experienced God's divine favor and that his request has been granted. And suddenly we see the chariot of fire in verse 11. It came to pass in verse 11 that the chariot of fire and the horses of fire, the Hene Rechav Esh Vesusei Esh, came, and they were parted, the chariots of fire, and they went on, and the horses of fire, which parted them both asunder, that Elijah, as we had read, went up in a whirlwind. Suddenly, a chariot that appears to be of fire, drawn by horses of fire, take Elijah up. As Elijah and Elisha were walking, a chariot then and horses of fire separated them. This seems to have been a miraculously caused manifestation, which the spectators, Elijah and Elisha, or Elisha and Elijah, were supernaturally enabled to see. The chariot and horses seem to have been symbolic of Yahweh's power. And we see this, for example, in Isaiah 31:1 and 39 or 34 verse 9, 1 Kings 10:29, etc. It is interesting that Baal is known to have ridden his chariot over the clouds. But here it is the chariot of Yahweh coming to separate Elisha and Elijah. And so at that instant, a whirlwind, a tempest of storm wind, or a storm wind, accompanied by vivid flashes of fire, caught Elijah up into heaven. Aroused by the account of translation, Malachi and the Gospels anticipate a return then of Elijah before the second advent of Christ, which is interesting. We see this in Malachi chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. And also we see it in Matthew chapter 11. So then, as we continue, we see in verse 12, let me just read verse 12. After Elijah is taken up in the whirlwind, Elisha saw it, and he cried, Elisha ro'ev metzaek, my father, the chariots of Israel and the horsemen of it. Avi, Rechab Yisrael, and the horsemen, and he saw him no more. Velo ra'ahu od. He took hold of his own clothes and tore them to pieces. V'yachazek bivgadav v'yekra'im lishnayim kera'im. He tore them and rent them into two pieces. He took up the mantle of Elijah that fell upon him then. Vayaram et aderet Eliyahu asher nafalu me alav. He took up the mantle of Elijah which fell upon him, and went back and stood by the bank of the Jordan. Vayashav vayamod al sefat hayarden. And so he took the mantle of Elijah that fell from him, vayikach et haderet Eliyahu asher nafala me alav. And when he did that, he smote the waters and said, Vayakeh et hamayim vayomer, where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? Ayeh Adonai Elohei Eliyahu, where is the God of Elijah? And when he also had smitten the waters, they were divided. Just like Elijah, it looks like here. Afhu vayakeh et hamayim vayechatsu hena vehena vayabor Elisha. They were divided here and there, hither and thither, and Elijah went over. And so Elisha is now going to take the mantle of Elijah and repeat the same miracle that his master had performed. So as we look at this just a moment, uh, the same expression, the chariot of Israel and the charioteers, occurs in 2 Kings 13:14. Elisha is saying, "You are Israel's chariots and charioteers combined. You, a single prophet, have done more to defend Israel and her glorious uh, work than all her chariots and drivers." The vision of the chariot and horsemen no doubt prompted this statement from Elisha. The same statement is later made about Elisha by Joash in chapter 13, verse 14. So Elisha tore his robe, the customary sign of grief over the loss of a loved one or a close friend was to tear the robe. So Elijah's separation caused this reaction. And so now we're going to see the ministry of Elisha. And that will follow in chapter 2, verse 13 to 28. And let me just stop there because he's going to do, well, let me just do verses 13, 14 for just a moment, and then we'll stop. So, verse 13, we had read, he took the mantle of Elijah and smote the waters and did the same miracle. And we have just read that. The transfer of this prophetic cloak was to Elisha a sign of his being Elijah's appointed successor, and his wearing of it was an outward token to others of the transfer to him of the spirit which Elijah possessed. And so in verse 14, notice it reads, and so he took the mantle of Elijah that fell upon him, smote the waters, and then said, where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? And again, we're going to see a similar miracle. Vayomer Ayeh Adonai Elohei Eliyahu, and he divided the water, as we had said previously. So Elisha first invokes God to demonstrate his power. The striking of the river with the cloak and the miraculous division of the waters that followed was an evidence that the Lord God of Elijah was with him as well. As this miracle was witnessed by the disciples of the prophets from Jericho, they immediately recognized the cessation of Elisha to the role of the prophet of Israel. I'm going to stop there. This is just an amazing text of the miracle of God, I believe, at work. And as I said, we are going to see a similar miracle in the ascension of Christ in the New Testament, and how Jesus miraculously ascended after his death and resurrection. But let me just stop there as we're sort of working through this at different parts, at least, of 2 Kings.